Many people today feel stuck between where they are and where they want to be. Leaving what feels safe is frightening. A familiar job, a familiar place, a familiar routine. The future feels uncertain, and the risk feels heavy. Yet the desire for something more refuses to go away. Long before our modern world, the Bible tells the story of a man who stood at this same crossroads. His name was Abram. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon of Haran, casting long golden shadows across the bustling marketplace. For 75 years, this earth, this dry, familiar soil, was all Abram had ever known. He was a man of substance, a man of family, and a man who had found a comfortable rhythm in the twilight of his life. He had his livestock, his servants, and a respected place in the community to anyone looking on. Abram was a man who had arrived. He was settled. He was safe. But on this particular evening, the air felt different. The wind didn't just blow. It whispered with a weight that seemed to press against the very stones of his home, and then the whisper became a voice. It wasn't a voice like the merchants in the square or the chatter of his kinsmen. It was a voice that resonated within the very marrow of his bones, an ancient, authoritative resonance that demanded every ounce of his attention. It was the voice of the Almighty. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. Imagine the weight of those words as they hung in the air. In the ancient world, your land was your life, your family was your social security, your protection, and your identity. To leave it all behind was to walk away from everything that made you who you were. To leave meant becoming a wanderer, a man without a country. A shadow in the desert. God was asking Abram to trade his certainty for a promise and his comfort for a calling. Yet the voice did not stop with the command. It carried a promise that seemed impossible for a man of his years. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. The next morning, the quiet of the household was replaced by the frantic energy of a life being dismantled. Imagine the sound of heavy wooden crates being dragged across stone floors, the bleating of confused goats, and the sharp, metallic clink of harness rings. Abram's neighbors likely watched with bewilderment as he packed his entire life onto the backs of camels. They would have asked where he was going, and he would have had no map to show them. He only had a direction. The land I will show you.
As the caravan finally pulled away from the gates of Haran, Abram took one last look at the city of his ancestors. Beside him walked his nephew Lot and his wife Sarai. They were stepping into the great unknown. The journey was not a short walk. It was a grueling trek of hundreds of miles day after day. The rhythmic sound of camel hooves on sand became their heartbeat. They crossed the scorching heat of the desert, their skin bronzed by the sun and their lungs filled with the fine dust of the trail. They traveled across the great river until the landscape began to change. The jagged limestone hills of Canaan rose to meet them like the spine of some ancient beast. When they reached the great tree of Moreh at Shechem, the voice returned. Abram didn't build a fortress instead. He gathered heavy unhewn stones and built an altar. He knelt in the dirt and offered a sacrifice. The smoke rose into the Canaanite sky, a physical marker, a flag planted in the earth. But faith is rarely a straight line. Soon after his arrival, the lush hills of Canaan turned a sickly brown. The rains failed, fear, a cold and creeping thing, began to replace the fire of the initial call. Tell them you are my sister, Abram whispered to Sarai as they crossed the border into Egypt, his voice trembling with a cowardice he hadn't felt in Haran. It was a half-truth, but a whole lie of the heart. Just as he feared, the word of Sarai's beauty reached the palace. Abram was given wealth, but he was a man who had lost his way. He sat in his tent, surrounded by Egyptian gold, while his wife sat in Pharaoh's harem. The promise seemed shattered. But the God who calls is also the God who rescues. Great plagues began to fall upon Pharaoh's house. Pharaoh, realizing the truth, summoned Abram to his throne room. What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Take her and go. Abram stood silent, humbled by the integrity of a pagan king and the fierce, unyielding protection of his God. They traveled back, retracing their steps, until they reached the place where Abram had first pitched his tent. There stood the altar he had built at the beginning. Abram stood before those stones once more. He called on the name of the Lord. He was no longer just a man who had heard a voice. He was a man who had tested the promise and seen it endure, even his own weakness. The journey of Abraham had truly begun, not as a perfect hero, but as a man who learned that the one who calls you is the one who carries you. He had left the familiar, he had survived the uncertain, and he had found that in the hands of the Almighty, the risk was always worth the reward.